maybe with a little bit of how my family came to Swami, and then maybe talk about my journey with Swami, my how I came to develop a connection with Swami, and what this connection means to me, and how I maintain this connection. And this will also relate to practical spirituality. So how to practice spirituality, how to be a spiritual person in the world, especially in the United States. So I feel this is a relevant topic. And then going off of that, I can talk about sort of what my connection feels like. And maybe we can have a little discussion on what other people, how they feel they connect with Swami, and how that connection is meaningful to them. So my mother first came to know about Swami in 1983. She was at a meditation retreat in New York, and she read a book that mentioned Swami and was saying that he is like Jesus come again. And so when she read this, she thought, if Jesus were on the earth today, I would need to go and see him. It's not a question of whether it's true or not, it's a question of if it were true, I would have the obligation to myself to go and see this person. So when she and my father got married in 1985, they decided that, well, my mother more decided, she told him, if we're getting married, okay, we have to go to India to see Sai Baba. And my father agreed, and so they went to India in 1985. They sat in the hot sand around and saw Swami come out. They were there for a couple of weeks, and then they came back here. 1990, they had my brother, and 1993, they had me. In the meantime, they set up a Sai Center in Boulder, and they began having it in our house. So I was born into Swami's love in that every Sunday people would gather and sing the bhajans, very much like here. As a young one, I know the feeling of coming here and the very special energy, Swami's energy, feeling Swami's love, listening to the bhajans, usually falling asleep during the bhajans, just because it's so wonderful. It's the most soothing thing to the soul and the heart and the mind and the body. It's such a wonderful experience. Those are my earliest memories of Swami's love, is in the bhajans, in the music. So in 1997, my family, all together, we went to India for the first time. I was 4, my brother was 7, and we went there. My parents are both musicians. My father plays the double bass. He teaches at a university in Colorado, CU Boulder. He teaches the double bass. My mother's a violinist. So my dad started teaching the band there in the institute. He started working with them. They already had some instruments, but they were not very much together. But he started getting them into shape, started working with them, with Swami's permission. And then my mother began a violin program at the primary school. So she brought over, with the help of other Sai devotees, we were bringing over violins each time we came. And so over time there was over 100 violins there. And she was teaching a number of classes. She would teach the girls and the boys both. She had classes every day. And she was teaching them, just introducing them to some music on the violin. So being 4 years old, I was too young to be in school, and so I would tag along with my parents to all of these events, usually with my mother. So I remember the first time I saw Swami. When I was 4, we were sitting at the back of the cycle month hall, and just Swami coming out, and he was just a pretty small orange figure walking. But I remember it, and I remember the sound of the darshan music and the sound of the bhajans, and I remember falling asleep afterwards. And again, the experience for me was very much with the sounds and the feelings, and just kind of I guess as a child I took it for granted, that feeling of security and love and warmth that comes with Swami's divine love. So as the years went on, I would be with my mother at the primary school when she was teaching. I was a favorite with the older girls. They loved playing with me because I was 4, this tall, and so I would play with them. I would play with other kids there, and my brother also, but more of the older kids were hitting me. So Swami began to call us in for interviews, and he would start to give my family more attention. And this sort of went on, deepening our connection with Swami. And I think one of my earliest memories of talking with Swami was very young. We were in the interview room, and Swami asked me, he said, "What is your name?" And to this day, you can tell I have a small stutter. And even then, I had a stutter. And as I looked at Swami, saying the word Robbie became this incredible challenge. And so I said, "Swami, I don't remember." So then he kind of looked at my mother, and he patted me on the head. So he just smiled, like he sort of understood. So the years went on. We were spending a number of months in India over the years. And I remember once I talked to Swami about my stuttering problem. He said, "Swami, I have this problem where I get midway through a sentence and I get stuck on a word. And it's like I can hear the word, I can see the word, I know what I'm trying to say, but I can't say it." And so, of course, I didn't know how to articulate it quite like that at the time. Then Swami took his hand and rubbed it on my throat and my chest. And the feeling of love and divine tenderness, and also concern, but also reassurance. I think those are important qualities of Swami's love that were present with me from a very young age. The reassurance, the safety, the love, the understanding, but also not necessarily taking away all your problems. I don't think that, for me, that has never been what Swami's love is about. I don't think that Swami ever desires to take away the essential problems of life that we all come to face. I think that's because Swami knows that the problems we face not only make us stronger, they also bring us closer to Him as we use His love and our connection with Swami to tackle these problems and to deepen our connection with Swami. I'll talk more on that a little later. So then, in my 3rd standard, in the middle of the year, my mother was homeschooling us there. My mother mentioned in a letter to Swami, she said, I think she was talking about education and educating my brother and I, and sort of her concern for what goes on in the schools in the States. And she was very concerned, as many parents I'm sure are, at sort of the nature of the education here and the values that the other children have at the school and how difficult it can be to stay focused on Swami and to maintain this connection with Swami. At the end of the letter, she sort of mentioned as a joke, "Maybe you'll take my kids in your school." And she didn't really mean it, and I'm not sure that she really wanted it either. She wanted us to be with her, and she wanted the family to be together. But she knew that Swami didn't take any foreign boys in his school, and so she didn't think that that was a possibility. Swami calls us in for an interview then and says, "I will take the boys." And so my mother was sort of shocked. I think it was a few weeks before sports meet. My brother was in 6th standard. He joined the sports meet program and he did sports meet with them. but we couldn't really join in the middle of that year. And we attended a few classes. We were sort of part of things a little bit, but then we came back and we did the last semester of my 3rd grade and his 6th grade year. The next year we went at the beginning of my 4th grade and his 7th grade. Of course, the way the system works there is school starts in June, and here school doesn't end until the end of May. And so for me, it felt like going back right at the end of school. Like I didn't get a summer holiday. So, anyways, I go there and I've always been very close with my mother, but at a young age, as I'm sure many children are, I was very attached to my mother and the love that my mother showered on me. And so fortunate to have a wonderful, loving mother, as I'm sure you all are. But that, being away from that connection, felt like something that was impossible for me to overcome. I didn't feel like being away from my mother was right. And I didn't want to. I just didn't want to. So when I joined Swami's school, things are difficult there. Things are different. The conditions are not necessarily comfortable. You're living with the same kids for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You develop social connections. There's rivalries. It's like any other school. Kids are kids. And so you kind of, and everything is magnified under the intensity of Swami's energy. And of course, whatever arguments I would get in, whatever disagreements I would get in, whenever I came to sit in the darshan line and listen to the bhajans, again, those would melt away. And my heart would be filled with that feeling of reassurance and of fullness. And I didn't realize it at the time, how full that feeling was. So the years went on, and 1 year passed, essentially. In my 5th standard, Swami became Swami started emphasizing the importance of Vedam chanting. And Swami would say that it's very important, it raises the vibrations of the world, and it's something that the world needs, is those higher vibrations. Swami would emphasize that the world needs the vibration levels to be raised. One of the most powerful ways to do that is with chanting the Vedas. So that started to become a really big part of school there. At primary school, kids would be taught it in large groups. We just sit in the prayer hall before school and would be taught to chant. And the high school would also be taught to chant, but I was in 5th, and so there the way it works is primary school for the boys is 1st through 7th, and high school is 8th through 12th. My brother was in 8th at that time, and so Swami, the first time he called us up was, I believe it was during winter break of 8th. He called us up together, and he asked us to chant some mantra pushpam. So we chanted that a little bit in front of him there, and then he sent us back. But I think before that, Swami had been calling up my brother and asking him to chant in front of the big hall. As I'm sure some of you remember, he would call him up as the Vedam is going on, and he would say, chant. So Jeffrey would turn around, and Swami's there, and you are the audience, and then he turns out, and then he has to stand there and chant, looking out on the thousands of people there. And then Swami would sometimes say, okay, stop. He would ask the Vedam group to stop. And so then he'd be chanting alone there. In front of thousands of people, this American boy. And so he started to get a lot of attention from Swami. And I was very happy for my brother. But as I'm sure you all understand, it's also very jealous. Seeing someone close to you, especially a sibling, get more attention than you, I think is something that everybody everybody who has a brother or sister at some point struggled with that feeling of, that's not fair. Why does he get more of that than I do? My brother and I have always had that little bit of rivalry. When there's a piece of pie, the last piece of pie, we have to cut it equally in half. And we're still the same way. It's a subconscious pattern. We share things equally. Otherwise we get in an argument about it. So we've always been that way. Regardless, he was getting more attention, and I was in the primary school, so I would only be going for morning darshan on Thursdays and Sundays, and in the evenings on festival days, which there are a lot of, but still. Anyways, the high school was going Sunday mornings and every afternoon, and he was sitting right in front of Swami and chanting there, and getting called up. Swami materialized him a ring, and he was, Swami would have him chant in front of all the dignitaries that came to show, like, look, this is how important Vedam is. If there's an American here that can chant it, you can chant it too, and you should be chanting it because it's important. Like, look at the power of the Vedam. Anyways, as time went on, I went through struggles at school. My health was pretty bad. I got sick. A lot. It's okay, no problem. Happens to me sometimes.
Sorry.
No. I was getting sick often, and one of the things about the primary school there is if you get sick enough, if you're really ill, they let you go home. And since my mother lived in ashram, and I knew this, it's not, I wouldn't say that I'll just let you take that for what it is. I did get genuinely sick very often and quite ill and have to go home. But there were times when, being very homesick, I would play to my advantage and get to go home and spend some time with my mother. So all this was going on. I struggled socially. I didn't feel I had many friends. Being the only white boy there, I kind of got in arguments. I would get in fights, and I don't know. I think it's just the nature of school there, and especially since I got to go home more than the other kids, and because my mother taught there at the primary school, I could see her more often than the other kids could. And so they were, with good reason, they were very jealous of me. And I understand that now, and I understood it then as well. That doesn't mean that it was any easier to be in a situation without very many friends. So I went through some struggles, but still that feeling remained with Swami. And that feeling of when chanting Vedam, going and sitting in front of him and looking at him, and chanting, it's almost as if, for me, I was chanting at Swami, which I think is different than chanting for Swami. Because there was a lot of me that was not necessarily too happy with how I felt. I was homesick, I wanted to go home, and I didn't feel like Swami really wanted me there. Like it was an important thing for me. And I know that's somewhat a childish feeling, but it was definitely a legitimate feeling that I had. But somehow that feeling of chanting at Swami became an offering of these feelings, a sacrificial offering of feelings that I was going through, of difficult feelings, feelings of resentment, feelings of anger, or even, feelings of sadness. And this began to grow, this sort of going in front of Swami and chanting. That feeling began to grow. In my 6th standard, Swami called me up one morning, and he came out front. Actually, I'll start a little earlier. He came out in the morning, the music started. I remember looking at, there was a picture, I don't know if you've seen the picture with Swami and his hand up inside the big jug, and the booth he's coming out. I was just wondering, I think it was that picture, I don't know. But it was some picture where there was a materialization. And I was just wondering, how does he do that? And then the music started, the Vedam started, and Swami came out, went around, came up, was sitting out front. But he wasn't sitting over by the high school, because on Thursday mornings, the high school boys wouldn't be there, and it was just the Vedam group. And so, basically on that side of Swami, just the Vedam group there, and then the primary school starting here, and the whole middle area more or less empty. So Swami was sitting right in front of me. I was in the second row. Swami motions to me. You get up. I go up, I say, Swami. He says, can you chant? I say, yes, Swami. So then I turn around and I start chanting. I think we were chanting Narayana Suktam. Then Swami tells the Vedam group to stop. So then I start chanting, but it's a Thursday morning, not as many people there. But I'm still chanting alone. My knees are shaking like this. And I'm chanting. It's okay. Then I get to Purusha Suktam, because I wanted to keep going, and I knew that he liked that one at the time. At the time, that was the one that he always asked my brother to chant. And so I began that one, and I got past the first stanza, and I reached the last stanza. I was out of breath again. Swami says, okay. So I turn around, and then Swami, I can see he already has something in his hand, but he waves it, and there's a necklace there with a pendant of Swami on it. And I look at Swami, and again, there's that feeling of reassurance and of fullness that makes all the other feelings that happen in the world, all the feelings, all the struggles in the school, all the struggles with everything, it makes those feelings sort of dissolve, at least in the moment while you're looking at him, and while he's looking into your eyes. And I say, Swami, I love you, Swami. And he says, I love you. And then he gives me the necklace. So that was a very important moment for me in my sixth standard, is sharing that with Swami, that love for him. In my seventh standard, there was sports meet. I did a skating event in sports meet. I was ill for some time. I was in the hospital. When I came out of the hospital, I spent some time at home. And then we came back to the States for summer holidays. And then I had my tonsils out in the summer before 8th standard, and that meant that I had to be maybe 2 weeks late for the beginning of school there. And the way that the Vedam group works in the high school there, the group of kids that get to sit right in front of Swami as he's sitting outside and chanting him every day, the way that that works is you have to have an audition to get into the group. So you go and you chant for the professors who are in charge of it, and then they decide whether you know well enough to sit there. But I was late, and I missed that time. And I've always been a little bit, it's always difficult for me to do things that I think make me look like I think that I'm special. And that's something that I've struggled with since I've been there, because I don't like that feeling of other people looking at me as if I've pulled some strings that make me look, that make it look like I seem a certain way. And this is an insecurity that I've had for a long time, which undoubtedly Swami loves to play with. Anyways, the Atrudra Mahayagam was happening that year. And so there were all the big fire pits in the middle there, and all the pujaris were there chanting, all the Vedic pundits were there every day chanting in front of Swami. Swami was giving a discourse almost every day. And he had, over the course of a couple of those discourses, he had called up my brother, and there was another boy there. His name was Marius. He was from Lithuania. So he had called them up, again, just demonstrating, look at these two boys can do this. So naturally, when Swami says, American boy, I think he's talking about my brother. Anyways, one of these afternoons, I'm sitting off to the side, if this is the veranda again, way over in the distance over there, and I have a book out and a piece of paper, and a pencil. And I'm looking around, and I'm sure you've all seen the decorations that are there, the very beautiful decorations that they always put up. So I was admiring them, and then looking at some of the things and drawing them. And then Swami's giving a discourse. I should have been paying attention, but I wasn't. And Swami says, American boy. And I don't think anything of it. I said, okay, he's asking about my brother. So I look up for a second, and then I see my brother go up. So then I can sort of look around a little bit more again. When I look back, there's a pathway created in front of me. The students are opened up. So I think, okay, they're trying to bring something up for Swami to get it blessed. Like somebody's bringing something up. So I look behind to make room, but nobody else behind me is making room. They're all looking at me. So when I stand up, of course, the shock of the moment, I drop my book. I'm like, oh, Swami. Like right in the middle of the discourse, I'm like, yes, Swami. And Swami says, can you chant? I said, yes, Swami. And then I start, in front of the whole crowd there. That's how I start chanting. I can't catch my breath. Swami says, okay. And my brother's there. Swami calls him, and then we both start chanting together, and then I'm able to chant. With my brother by my side, I'm able to chant. That's the wonderful thing about having a brother. So we chant for Swami for some time, and then he calls up Marius as well. Then he asks us to sing a bhajan. So they had prepared a bhajan to sing. I think it was Hare 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 Mahadeva. That one. Anyways, they had set a key with the guy on the harmonium. But they get in front of the mic, and they're in the pressure of the moment, they just start without consulting the key, and they start way too high. So they start, it goes Brahma Vishnu Surati. So it's like Hara 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 Brahma Vishnu Surati. So, of course, I'm an 8th standard, I'm about this tall, and they're about my height. And so they're in front of the mic, and so we start with me in the middle, and then they move, and then they move. There's a great photograph of the both of them standing like this, and of me right behind them, just singing into their shoulders. And the funny thing about that is that I was the only one who could sing up that high anyways, because my voice hadn't dropped yet. So I could have sung if they had let me. It's okay. Oh, man. So from that day onwards, I became a part of the Veda group. And that's when kind of the real intense sitting in front of Swami began for me. It was always intense. It was always intense, always, sitting there sometimes for hours, especially as a kid. I'm sure you guys know. It's like when you're sitting and listening to somebody talk or listening to Vedam go on, it gets pretty boring. It gets pretty boring and you start to get pretty irritated. And so in primary school, that was a big thing, like sitting there in a cramped space, it's really hot. You've been there for hours, you have to go to the bathroom. It's just not nice for a little kid sometimes. getting into high school, the discomfort started to become more manageable and was overpowered by kind of the immediacy of Swami's presence there, how close Swami was, and how whenever you looked out, you couldn't be sure if he was looking directly at you, and it always felt like he was looking right at you. So sitting there right in front of him, always with your back straight, the ground is sloped a little bit going up, so that makes it all the more difficult to sit straight. Anyways, sitting there became more and more of me offering all of my feelings inside to Swami, to all of these difficult things that I had gone through. And of course, difficult is a relative word, but for me, they were difficult. And so I began to offer them more and more to Swami. And those were the years then when my brother and I and this other boy, Marius, we had to be expecting that Swami would call us up on any given day. We had to be ready to be called up and to be told to chant. So there were times when Swami would call us up and maybe we weren't the most prepared. My brother has a good story. He tells about this. I'll tell it for him because he's not here. He tells a story. He was doing a translation thing where he went up and he would chant one line, the teacher would translate it. He would chant the next line, and the teacher would translate it. So I'm sure you all know when you're learning Veda, you learn it by chanting the whole thing through, not by chanting one line at a time. At least that's the way they teach it there, is it becomes this thing that you can do as you're running through it. But it's much more difficult to do stopping and then remembering which line comes next. So he was up there, and he was having a lot of difficulty not being able to remember the next line. So Swami had to call some of the other kids and have them chant. And so for him, he always tells this as a lesson of, you always need to be prepared. And that Swami has the highest expectations of you, as Swami just has the highest expectations of you, and you need to be prepared to live up to those expectations. Anyways, a number of wonderful experiences later, Swami calling us up. It becomes time for us to leave the ashram there and to come back to the States. This is in my 10th standard, and after my brother's first year of undergrad there. Before we left, Swami had called us in for an interview where, this is before the end of the year, where he was asking us, he was very concerned about the cost. We were telling him, Swami, my mother was having some health problems, which is why we needed to come back to the States. And so we were telling him about this and kind of hinting that it may not be possible for us to come back. And he was very concerned about, talking about the cost. Like, is it an issue of the cost? Is it a problem with the money? He was very loving, very concerned, but also very serious. And I think that's the last time that I spoke with Swami, is in the interview room, probably 10 days before the end of the semester, maybe before we left. And Swami was very serious. And I think Swami, it would be naive for me to think that Swami didn't know that we weren't coming back. We didn't know we weren't coming back, but I think Swami knew. And I think the seriousness was the knowledge that my brother and I were going out into the world back here, and some concern for us, wondering if we are prepared to face the difficulties and the challenges here. So we came back here, and it became clear that we wouldn't be able to go back. My mother wouldn't be able to travel back. And My father had been alone for most of the year for about 7 years, and so he had a difficult time of it, and he was really ready to be with his family. And it really was time for all of us to be together as a family and to be in our country. So my 11th standard began. I went to public school, and this was difficult for me. I had some friends from my childhood that were there at the high school, but of course they all had their social groups. They all had their things going on. And there was all this subtext and all this sort of subtext of understanding in the culture that I didn't have a background in. I just didn't understand a lot of the way things worked. So I went through a period of difficult transition, trying to find out who I am in this culture. After finally coming away from the strict guidance of the school there, trying to understand who I am as a person away from such strict enforcement where everything is enforced. What does it mean for me to be a human being? What does it mean for me to be in the world? What does it mean for me to be a science student in the world? What does it mean for me to love Swami? What do all these things mean? And how are they relevant? And why are they relevant? I think these are questions that everybody's faced, why is it relevant to have a connection with Swami? How is this important, especially when you're young, and especially when you've been immersed in Swami's love through your family for your whole life? It's a very valid question. Why is it relevant? And when you understand how it is relevant, which maybe I'll talk about in a little bit, then how do we maintain that connection? So I went through a period of rejecting things that I had been taught there. So starting to just explore different ways of thought. I read some existential literature, those kind of things, sort of exploring ideas of there is no purpose, there is no God, these kind of questions, which I think are serious questions. And along with that, and being away from Swami's constant love, grew this feeling of being alone. And I think this is an essential human feeling, there's a feeling of emptiness inside, and a feeling that something is lacking inside. But it can be really hard to pinpoint that, because that manifests as any number of things. And you deal with it in any number of ways. You cover it up in any number of ways. You seek short-term satisfaction. You do whatever you can to get away from that feeling, but that's a nagging feeling for people who sort of have pondered the nature of reality, I think. And one night I was walking alone, and I was feeling very alone. And then I began to sing some bhajans. And I just started, Radha Hare Sita Ram Shama Bane Radhe Shama. That one. That's always been one of my favorite ones. And then there was this sense that I was no longer alone. And that feeling of reassurance and love and connection came back to me. And it's not like I hadn't been connecting with Swami when I was back. I had been connecting. I had been connecting with him. I had been following through. But I would say that our internal relationship was strained because I was questioning him, and I'm sure he was questioning me. He was putting me through situations to make me understand the way things work. Anyways, that was a turning point in my life. It was as if from above I felt the presence of Swami with me. And I felt Swami saying to me, not in words, but in feeling, that I'm always there. I'm always with you. And he had said that to me once in an interview when I was very young. I told him, Swami, sometimes I have nightmares and I have bad thoughts. Thoughts of bad things happening to people that I love. And Swami looked at me and said, I'm always with you, within you, above you, around you, below you. And that statement came back to me, but this time it was practical. It was me reaching out to him. It was me making an effort to connect with Swami. It was me singing to Swami, and it was Swami coming to me to hold my hand and to guide me through a difficult part in my life.
Robbie,
Yeah.
need to interrupt. Could you move the 5 minutes side ministry, the littlest ones? Your parents are here. If you want to step outside, that's time. The older ones, I think, can continue to listen if you wish. Side ministry is getting a little restless, so if you'd like to step outside.
So I began then to come back to Swami. And I realized that my connection with him became deeper than it was before. My conversation with him became deeper and more honest than it was before. When I was in India, there was always this sense of, if Swami thinks there's anything worldly or bad about me or my thoughts, then he won't love me anymore. And there was this fear of not being loved by Swami anymore. But after coming back here and going through a difficult time, realizing that Swami loves us all unconditionally, if we reach out to him, he will love us back. No matter what state of mind we're in, no matter where we are, who we are, our place in life, where we are in life. And that's where the real importance of Veda and bhajans and practical spirituality come in for me. I don't know, everybody has a different connection with Swami. Everybody has a different reason why they connect with Swami. For me, it's me making a choice to choose a reality that is full of love and divinity and full of Swami's love. And Swami making a choice, or for him it's unconditional, but Swami coming into my life and affecting positive change in my life, and me hoping to open up my life so that Swami may work through me, and Swami that I may be an instrument of his love, ultimately. So for me, chanting Vedam and singing bhajans and playing music, these are ways that I connect with Swami. These are ways that I reassure myself of my connection. So, in conclusion, I'd just like to say that, first of all, I'm very thankful for you all having me here once again. I'm very thankful for everything that Swami has given me. And I think that a couple of points in my talk, maybe I can just go over again. Swami is always there for us. And Swami loves us. Even in the worst of times, even if we don't feel like maybe he's changing anything in our physical life, he's changing something in our internal life. And that's something that I didn't talk about which I'd like to just touch on quickly, is that for me, difficulties are Swami challenging you. How are you going to face this? How are you going to choose to deal with this feeling, with this problem? It's a question. And more than Swami, it's life. It's life coming at us with a question of how are you going to deal with this problem or this question? And being armed with the tools that we have from Swami, Swami's love, the tools to connect with him, the Vedam, the bhajans, we can make the choice to use these to connect with Swami. And that's a choice that I would highly encourage everyone to make, especially when you're young. Just to continue coming to the Sai Center, to continue singing to Swami, to continue being in communication with Swami, to continue speaking to him, if it's in your head, however it is, if you don't know if he's listening. I know that feeling. You know, does Swami hear what I'm saying? If you ask for his presence in your life, for his presence in your heart, he will act through you. And it may not be everything you necessarily want. It may not be the outcomes that you predict or that you think are the best. Because Swami will act through you in the way that is best. So, thank you, Swami. Jai Sai.
He's had a long day. He's auditioned at the Keys Institute of Music. So he's had a late night last night. So he's being very nice to us.
No, it's my pleasure. I have the book here in case I need it. I'm just a little bit tired, but I think my memory should hold. I'll just chant the first paragraph of Rudram. I don't need this. It's okay. Feel free to chant along. Om Gananam Tva Ganapatigum Havamahe Kavim Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspatana Shunvanno Dipissida Sadanam Prano Devi Saraswati Vaje Dirvajinivati Dhinama Vidragavatu Ganeshaya Namaha Saraswatyai Namaha Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om Om Namo Bhagavate Rudraya Om Namaste Rudramanyava Utota Ishave Namaha Namaste Astu Dhanvane Bahubhyamutate Namaha Yata Isha Shivatama Shivam Babhuvate Dhanuhu Shiva Sharavya Yata Vadayano Rudramudaya Yate Rudra Shiva Tanura Ghora Papakashini Tayanastanu Vashantamaya Girishantabhijakashihi Yamisham Girishantahaste Vibharshastave Shivam Giritratam Kurumahigum Sif Purusham Jagata Shive Navajasa Tva Girishacha Vadamasi Yathana Sarva Vijagata Yakshmagum Subana Asata Adhyavochadadi Bhakta Pradhamo Devyo Pishaka Aheguscha Sarvaan Jambayant Sarvaaschayatu Dhanyaha Asaugyastamro Aruna Utabhabrussu Mangalaha Ye Chemagam Rudra Abhito Dikshushrita Sahasrasho Veshagam Heda Imahe Asaugyo Vasarpati Nilagrivo Vilohitaha Utainam Gopa Adrishan Udaharyaha Utainam Vishwa Bhutani Satrishthom Nudagathinaha Namo Astu Nilagrivaga Sahasrakshaga Menushe Athoge Asya Sattva Nohantebhyo Karandamaha
प्रमुञ्चधन्वनस्तनुभयोरात्निगोर्जाम् यास्तते हस्त इषवःपदाता भगवो वप अपतत्यतपुस्त्वगुं सहस्राक्षशते शुभे निशीर्कशल्यानां मुखा शिवो नः सुमना भव विद्यम्भनुक्कपर्दिनो विशल्यो मानवागुम् उता अनेशन्नस्येष व आबुरस्य निषङ्गतिः याते हेतिर्मेडुष्ठमहस्ते बभूव ते धनुः तगास्मान् विश्वतस्त्वमगक्ष्मगापरिभुज नमस्ते अस्त्वायुधायानाथताय तृष्णवे उभाभ्यामुत ते नमो बाहुभ्यां तव धन्वने परिते धन्वनो हेतिरस्मान् वृणक्तु विश्वतः अथो य इषुतिस्थवारे अस्मन्निदेहितम् नमस्ते अस्तु भगवन् विश्वेश्वराय महादेवाय त्रयम्बकाय त्रिपुरान्तकाय त्रिकाग्निकालाय कालाग्निरुद्राय नीलकण्ठाय मृत्युञ्जयाय सर्वेश्वराय सदाशिवाय श्रीमन्महादेवाय नमः ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः
Chakri, we need to thank Chakri for that.
Sorry, Robbie, I have to leak it out.
I know, I need to say, please thank Chakri for all that.
Yeah, all the members here, we are so grateful that you spend the afternoon with us, and the talk was so inspirational, and you're truly an instrument of song and love. Thank you.
And I think some of the younger children
Do you need your
are
bag?
waiting outside, those younger children. Pravalika, I know your mom's waiting outside. Oh, she doesn't want to be part of the day. She's excellent.